Uh, that's a big question, a big couple questions. Right now, I think the problems with social media vary widely by platform, and by even functions within platforms.
Yep.
Um, so, I think one of the things that unites a lot of these problems is that they were built by companies um, that were looking to attract growth, that were looking to attract users and engagement. They were built around the idea that the less friction is involved in sharing something or posting something or clicking on something, the better. And so they have really sort of made design decisions and monetization decisions not thinking through downside risk, not thinking through abuse potential, just purely trying to make the numbers go in the right direction. They've been hugely successful at that. These companies are very big and very profitable. And I think, I've been writing a lot recently about automation, and
Mhm.
I think we see on YouTube one of the most advanced forms of automation ever built. I mean, Google has the best AI engineers in the world. They publish the most papers, they win the most awards. And for much of the last decade, the biggest, most profitable AI project at Google has been YouTube recommendations.
Mm.
Platform comes from recommendations.
Right.
It's not, I think when we think of sort of the cutting edge of AI, we think of like an open AI, lab, or some, Carnegie Mellon, research project, three or something like that. But like YouTube recommendations are the cutting edge of AI research in this country and probably in the world. And I don't think we ever think about that. We just sort of think, oh, that's like what every other platform does. It recommends stuff. So I think that the confidence that these firms have in the ability of machine learning to do things like surface relevant and engaging content to people is based on a pretty shallow definition of engaging and relevant. It's based on what they can measure, which is watch time, which is
Sure.
I think my point in showing that to people on Twitter was just pretty simple. It was, this is happening, and you probably don't know about it,
Mhm.
because I think people who spend time on Twitter, journalists, researchers, sort of high information news consumers, the conversation there is pretty divorced from what's happening on Facebook, which is 10 times as large. And my goal was not to prove a point about politics or algorithms or anything like that. When I started, I was just sort of seeing this data and saying, I cannot believe how different this is than what I'm seeing on my Twitter feed. And I bet Twitter might find it interesting to know what's happening on this platform that is 10 times bigger. So that was all I was trying to do by starting, posting these lists of the most engaged Facebook posts, is just simply like, check this out. Like, that's kind of interesting. Maybe we should talk about that. I think and this is strange for me to be casting myself in the role of defender of humans here, but I actually don't think humans are like at their core bad. Like I don't think most people wake up in the morning and say like, how could I enrage myself and others? How could I divide myself from others? Like I don't think that's how we're wired. And yet I think that's the kind of behavior that these platforms are built to incentivize. I just don't think they understand the sort of the decisions that they've made around how to measure and sort of maximize certain forms of engagement and what that produces in people. So I actually don't know that I think that we're all just wired this way and that these platforms just reflect human nature. If you go into, a very sort of austere and imposing, government building, the design of that space, the architecture, the columns, the layout, like it tells you something about how you are supposed to behave in that space. And I think the same is true of online platforms, that when people go on 4chan, or they go into a Facebook group for the Boogaloo movement, or they go onto a YouTube channel for a white nationalist, the design of that community, the architecture of the platform has a lot to do with how they will ultimately behave.